Over the centuries, there have been hundreds of particularly baffling missing persons cases. In recent years, a case like that of Brian Schaefer or Brianna Maitland might come to mind as a mystery which, with the evidence available, cannot be explained. But there are dozens of such cases still to be explored. Join us for today's episode as we examine two of the strangest disappearances ever recorded. Juan Pedro Martinez Gomez. In the summer of 1986, Andre Martinez, a truck driver, was tasked with transporting around 20,000 L of sulfuric acid from the Spanish town of Los Canovas to the port city of Bilbao. Occasionally, Andre would bring his wife, Carmen Gomez, along with him. And on this particular journey, he decided to bring both Carmen and the couple's 10-year-old son, Juan Pedro Martinez Gomez, as a reward for his recent school efforts, which had earned him good grades. The trip was expected to be the same as any other Andre had done, but on the morning of June 25th, it took a tragic turn. Eyewitnesses would later report seeing the truck driving erratically at around 6 that morning as it moved through the Sommier mountain pass in the community of Madrid. While driving at around 86 miles per hour, Andre's truck was seen forcing one vehicle off the road, sideswiping another, leading it to tear off its wing mirror, and then continuing to accelerate as if its brakes weren't working correctly as it moved through the curvy mountain pass. Finally, the truck turned sharply, skidding and crashing. The vehicle was completely overturned, puncturing the system containing the sulfuric acid, which then began to leak out across the road. The civil guard promptly arrived on the scene and was forced to act quickly to avoid an ecological disaster, as the site of the crash was close to a river, and there was concern that the acid would spread to the body of water. Thousands of pounds of lime were brought to the affected area, and while paired with sand, it was spread to absorb the acid. Several emergency responders were burned by the toxic acid during the incident, and at least 3 nearby villagers were temporarily left without water. When the acid was finally neutralized, emergency workers were able to reach the cab of the truck, where they found the bodies of Andre and Carmen. The couple had tragically perished in the accident, while the acid spill had started to affect their remains. Hours would pass before their bodies could be removed from the scene safely. Initially, authorities were unaware that 10-year-old Juan Pedro had been in the truck with his parents. It wasn't until they contacted Carmen's mother to tell her about the accident that they learned of his presence, as she asked, "What about the child? Please tell me the child is fine." Upon hearing that there was now a missing boy, authorities began a lengthy and intensive search for him. They scoured the area within an 18-mile radius using scent dogs and helicopters, as well as on-foot searches, but no sign of Juan Pedro was found. The only evidence that he had been in the vehicle was several pieces of children's clothing and a few children's cassette tapes, as he would have been unable to wear a seatbelt in the cab since they were only 2. There was some speculation that he had been thrown from the truck when it crashed, but no evidence was found to support this idea. There was also a theory that he had made it to the nearby river, but there was no sign of him here either. Authorities even brought in machinery to help them sift through the sand and lime in case his body was buried beneath it. But still, there was no trace of him. At one point, it was even suggested that his remains had been dissolved by the acid, but experts pointed out that it takes days for a body to be fully consumed by sulfuric acid, and it has to be fully submerged. So, there was no way that a 10-year-old boy's body could have just vanished in a few hours of being exposed to the substance. While the search for Juan Pedro was ongoing, examiners turned to the truck to discover what exactly went wrong that morning. Despite the reports from eyewitnesses who believed the vehicle's brakes were failing, though, it was found that its brakes were in perfect working order. Furthermore, the truck had recently passed a safety inspection and tune-up, both of which had been carried out in preparation for the journey. Taking a closer look at the truck's tachometer, which effectively measures the speed of the vehicle, allowed investigators to piece together the family's journey. The trip is believed to have started at 7 p.m. the night before, and stops were made at 9 p.m., 12:12 a.m., 3 a.m., 4:13 a.m., and 5:00 a.m. The last stop was at 5:20 a.m., when the family stopped for breakfast near the N1 motorway and were noticed by several people who described seeing Juan Pedro in a red sweatshirt. A further examination of the tachometer also revealed something odd, that in the last 80 minutes or so of the trip, the truck had stopped 12 times, but each stop was extremely brief, from just a few seconds to 20 seconds. Investigators noted there were no traffic jams on their route that morning, nor any accidents, nor any other reason why they may have been stopping and starting. To this day, many are baffled as to why Andre's driving was so erratic. About a year after the incident, the truck was fully disassembled, and trace amounts of heroin were discovered in the tanker part of the truck. Though neither Carmen nor Andre had criminal records, family members would later reveal to the police that Andre had been forced to transport heroin to northern Spain by a local drug smuggling ring an unspecified number of times. This led the police to speculate that Juan Pedro had been allowed on the trip as a means to protect him, rather than as a reward for his good school grades. They theorized that perhaps the accident was due to Andre's nerves, or that he was attempting to chase after another vehicle that had kidnapped his son, to make sure he carried out the job. Around this time, witness sightings emerged that a young boy had been seen climbing into a white van with two other people, an elderly woman and a middle-aged man following the accident. There was some speculation that the young boy was Juan Pedro and that he'd been kidnapped, or perhaps even taken to safety to prevent him being kidnapped before the accident occurred, which might account for the stops that the family made in the hour beforehand. Spanish news outlets also reported that another witness believed he had seen Juan Pedro for himself a few months after his parents died. The witness, who was the owner of a driving school, told the police that a blind elderly woman had entered his building asking for directions to the U.S. Embassy. She had a young boy with her who seemed somewhat disoriented. He also believed the older woman was the same one who'd been seen near the white van by the other witnesses. Unfortunately, the woman and the boy were never located, and neither was the middle-aged man. Similarly, although police attempted to find the van, which was described as a white Nissan Vanette, they were never able to tie such a vehicle to the case. Juan Pedro is still missing. If you have any information about his disappearance, you can contact Interpol's Spanish Central Office at the web address shown on screen. 51-year-old Marian Barter was last heard from on August 1, 1997. Marian's actions in the months leading up to her disappearance are rather odd, beginning in April 1997 when she sold the home she had owned for just 3 years. She had purchased the property in Southport, Queensland, Australia in 1994 for $180,000 and sold it at a loss for $165,000 in 1997 in what is described as a quick sale. A month after she sold her home, Marian legally changed her name to Florabella Natalia Marian Reckel and sent away for a new passport with her new name on it. However, she continued to go by her old name with friends, family, and her employer, and never notified anybody of the change. Another month later, on June 20th, she resigned from her job as a teacher. She stated that she was looking to visit the UK and take up teaching in England. As well as resigning, though, she requested that her teacher certification be renewed. 2 days later, Marian left Australia. She intended to visit England first, and eventually traveled throughout the rest of the UK and parts of Europe. While she was abroad, she sent postcards to her loved ones back home, many of which were postmarked in Kent, Sussex, and London. She was last heard from on August 1st, when she called her daughter, Sally Leedon, and told her that she planned to extend her stay in Kent. She had made arrangements to ride the Orient Express, but decided to reschedule her upcoming reservation so that she could remain in England for longer. Marian was never seen or heard from again. Her 2 children grew concerned for her well-being just a few months later, in October 1997, when she failed to get in touch to wish her son a happy birthday. Her daughter, Sally, decided to contact her mother's bank in order to find out if her account had been active recently. It was here that she discovered the account had been emptied of over $80,000 in daily increments of $5,000 between August and September of that year. Most of the money had been withdrawn from 3 branches, the first of which was in Byron Bay, New South Wales, and the other 2 were Burleigh Heads and Ashmore, both of which were in Queensland. Sally also learned while digging deeper and speaking with a friend she had in customs that on the morning of August 2nd, 1997, Marian's passport arrived back in Australia via Brisbane, despite the fact that 1 day earlier, Marian had told Sally she planned to extend her stay in England. Sally went to the police with what she knew, but she was immediately brushed off, and the investigation was largely bungled. Sally recalled that without so much as citing her mother or reaching her via the telephone, the police told her that Marion was alive and well and didn't want to be contacted. They then declined to file her report as a missing persons investigation, instead marking it as an occurrence. Unsurprisingly, her family were furious with the treatment of the disappearance, and Marion's father went to the Salvation Army Missing Persons Bureau to ask for help in locating her. However, the Salvation Army were of little help either, and only contributed more confusion and misinformation to the case. According to Marion's father, Jack Wilson, in March of 1999, nearly 2 years after she disappeared, he received a letter from the Salvation Army which claimed that a police officer spoke with a security officer at Colonial State Bank in New South Wales. The security officer alleged that she had spoken of starting a new life. They also stated that in 1990, 7 years before she went missing, she withdrew the balance of her account in Ashmore. These inconsistencies led Jack to conclude that his daughter's disappearance wasn't being taken seriously by the Salvation Army. Years later, the organization apologized and admitted they'd never located Marion and were not sure of the truth behind the statements she had supposedly made at the bank. Marion remained out of contact over the next 10 years. Her daughter married in 1998, and in 2001, her first granddaughter was born. Still, there was no sign of the missing mother of two. Even in 2003, when both her son and her father passed away, nobody heard from her. In 2007, Sally reached out to the Australian Federal Police's Missing Persons Unit, asking them to make an appeal for information. The AFP agreed and planned to use Marion's disappearance as part of their annual Missing Persons Week campaign, which they believed might bring in new information. However, the New South Wales police force barred the use of her case in the appeal, claiming that they needed to protect the investigation. Sally noted that she had spoken with UNS Wales police officers beforehand and had been told that there was no active investigation at the time, making this claim extremely odd. In 2009, the case was re-examined by a cold case investigator, and it was only then that it was discovered that she had changed her name in May of 1997, just months before she vanished. This detective also found out that when she returned to Australia on August 2, 1997, her customs card claimed that she was a married housewife living in Luxembourg and that she planned to stay in Australia for just 3 days. 11 days after her arrival on August 13th, her Medicare card, under her old name, Marion Barter, was used in the city of Grafton. Following this, Marion's passport never left the country and her Medicare card was never used again. In 2010, an investigator looked into the possibility that a missing woman named Barter had been killed and buried near the University of New England in Armidale, New South Wales. This information had been given to the police 8 years earlier by way of an anonymous tip, but it appears to have never been investigated. The detective took a scent dog to the area described and searched the remains for 2 days, but found nothing. The following year, the Byron Bay Missing Persons Unit removed Marion from the NS Wales State Missing Persons Register with Gary Sheen, who had previously been in charge of the case, stating that he had recommended it be removed because Marion went to great lengths to change her identity and start a new life, estranged from her family and friends. In 2013, Sally was contacted by someone using the name Clark Hunter via Facebook. Hunter sent her a message that read, "Natalia is alive, but you never see her again. It was not her intention to disappear. She was forced." Sally subsequently took a screenshot of the message and handed it over to authorities, but this lead was never investigated. Years passed with no progress being made on the case. Marion Barter's case was largely dismissed by authorities who had no interest in pursuing any leads or searching for her whereabouts. It wasn't until 2019 that some change came when the NSW Missing Persons Unit was disbanded. The Australian Federal Police Homicide Review Unit decided to reopen the case and put Marion back on the National Missing Persons Register. 2 years later, the local NSW government and police force announced a $250,000 reward for any information leading to answers in her case. The reward was increased in 2022 to $500,000. An inquest into Marion's disappearance began in 2021 and continued into 2022. During it, it was discovered that a man named Rick Blum had an affair with the mother of two in 1997, a short time before she vanished, making him one of the last people to see her. Blum, now 84, had been jailed for fraud for 4 years in France in 1971 and obtained Australian citizenship in 1976. He is a Belgian national who once used the surname Remakel, the same one that Marianne adopted upon changing her name in 1997. Multiple women have accused Bloom of defrauding and deceiving them, and although he became an Australian citizen fraudulently, no action has been taken against him. When asked if he had any information about Marianne's whereabouts, Rick Bloom reportedly stated, "I myself believe she is alive. That's what I believe. But I don't know anything about what she did or not. Nothing. I don't know." When asked why he thought she was still alive, he replied, "She said that she wanted to separate from her family. She didn't want anything to do with any member of her family. She was a bit of a strange person." The inquest found that Bloom had likely persuaded or otherwise encouraged Marianne to sell her home, and that they likely spent time together in England. During her trip, Marianne wrote to Sally using paper that was branded with the logo for Hotel Nico Narita, which is the same hotel Bloom stayed at on his way to Europe. It is believed that he had given Marianne the paper when they met in England. It was also revealed that Bloom had encouraged Marianne to withdraw $80,000 on her return to Australia, which was transferred to an unknown bank account 2 months later. Bloom claimed that he last saw Marianne when she came to his house to retrieve some tea chests she had purchased 3 weeks before she left for the UK, and that she was accompanied by another man, whom he took to be a Navy officer or a pilot due to the uniform he was wearing. However, the coroner deemed that this claim was implausible. The coroner was initially scheduled to hand down her verdict by November 30th, 2022. But on the 29th, it was announced that these findings had been vacated, and the inquest would not be concluded until further investigations occurred. On February 29th, 2024, those findings were finally announced when Marianne Barter was declared deceased. Though there is no body and no way of telling when Marianne died, the coroner concluded that she perished sometime after October 15th, 1997. The inquest also concluded that Bloom knew more than he was letting on, but it was not recommended that he be charged at this time. The coroner added that nothing he said could be taken at face value until it could be corroborated. It was recommended that further investigations be carried out by the police. Sally Leedon is still trying to find answers in her mother's case. She participated in the 7 News podcast, The Lady Vanishes, in a bid to bring in new information, and has told the Australian media how many times she's been warned off the podcast by police officers, stating, "They had told me many times that they hated the podcast, that the podcast was damaging." The police have claimed that the podcast was interfering with and complicating their own very belated investigation. But for Sally, it's shedding light on her mother's case, which was neglected for decades. Marianne Barter has still not been found. If you have any information about her case, you can contact Crime Stoppers on 1-800-330. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and reactions. And remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.